Welcome to Suburban Warrior, the podcast that will impact, inspire, and empower you to transform your mindset and become the badass warrior that you are. I'm your host and fellow warrior, Chrissy Pfeiffer, former clinician and corporate marketing exec turned multi-passionate entrepreneur, performance and life coach, and mom to 4 not-so-little warriors. Each week, I will bring you honest conversations with inspiring guests to share their stories of resilience, optimism, success, and simple yet effective strategies so that you transform your thoughts and change your behavior to get the results you want in your life. You will be empowered to take action, warrior up, and believe in you. Let's do this. What's up, warriors? Welcome back to another episode of the Suburban Warrior podcast. I am your host, Chrissy Pfeiffer, and you guessed it, I have another amazing suburban warrior with me today here to share her story. And today's story, I think, is going to be, it's a very unique one, but it's also one I think that a lot of us are going to be able to resonate with because as women in mid-age, I feel like we have all at some point been to a doctor at one time or another who has, dismissed our symptoms or told us that we're fine or made us feel that maybe we're a little crazy when we tell them how we're actually feeling. So we're going to get into Marian's amazing story. But first, let me tell you a little bit about my guest today. Born and raised on Long Island to a large Irish family of singers and storytellers, Marian Adams had an enchanted childhood. Music theater was her first love throughout grammar and high school. She received a master's in fine arts in 1984 and worked in television production and PR post-college in New York City. Marian married her childhood sweetheart in 1989, and their first date was to see Jaws. Marian's husband was a first lieutenant in the Marine Corps and stationed in Southern California. It was a dreamy place to begin their lives together. In 2001, they settled back on Long Island with their 3 children. Up to 2015, Marian was active, athletic, vibrant, happy person, a voracious reader, particularly on health and wellness, a fitness enthusiast and passionate cook. She loved preparing delicious, healthy meals for her family and treasured friends. Marian's athletic family skis together and spends summer days at the beach until sunset. After being peppered for years with inquiries from friends and acquaintances about her lifestyle and wellness regimen, in 2013, she started hosting a backyard boot camp for a group of 10 women on her patio with a fire pit burning in the background. They exercised together and shared stories, laughter, tears, and hot coffee in the wee hours of the morning, no matter the temperature. It could be 94 or 19 degrees. It was exhilarating, fun, and as one friend said, it felt spiritual. Marian relished in creating this space for these women who were precious to her. Each week, Marian shared something with them, an article, a recipe, a yummy healthful drink, or a candle to bring home. It was so much more than exercise. It was a cocoon of safety and support for one another. And they knew without even having to say it that whatever is shared in the backyard stays in the backyard. All of that came to a screeching halt in 2015 when Marian fell apart. Welcome to the podcast, Marian.
Thank you, Chrissy. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So I am thrilled to have you here to share your story because I know, I found your story through the article where you were interviewed, and I was my jaw was floored while I was reading your story. And I just thought to myself, how could this be? How could this happen to someone and just not get help? So I think we need to start from the beginning of where it was that you fell apart. What happened?
So in 2015, I started to, quote, not feel like myself. Many people have been there. I was losing confidence in myself, feeling a little paranoid. For instance, I've said before, I was at a Army-Navy game. We're huge Navy fans in our family. We pack the car, we bring the chili, the sandwiches, the hats, all the fun. And we go to this, wonderful, really exciting event. And I remember being there and I looked fine. I looked like myself, but I felt like I was watching everyone else and that I wasn't any fun. I couldn't fully participate the way I had for years and years and years. So it was very discouraging. But again, no one would have noticed. My husband would go back and forth to the seats where our children were a few rows away. And I would start thinking maybe he didn't want to sit with me, which is ridiculous. But that is how I felt. I felt that way. And so this went on for some time. I just remember one day I was home and I looked at my husband and I thought to myself that I felt I was replaceable. I felt I wasn't good enough. Someone could be doing a better job at, raising the children and being his wife and all of the things that we do together. Very disconcerting. And one time I just started crying to him, something to the effect of, please don't leave me. And he was, Marian, you silly. He gave me a little tap and a hug and a smoop and, just thought I was just having a moment. So those tears started to come more and more and more frequently. I could be in the grocery store and just burst into tears, calling relatives. They came very, very frequently. And then I stopped sleeping. And we've all had restless nights, but I don't mean restless night. I mean, we always go to bed around 10, turn out the light around 10:30. And for 32 years, my former Marine husband is up at the crack of dawn, 5 a.m. on the dot, every weekday of our married life. And I would say, I haven't slept. And I hadn't slept.
Yeah.
So there went to sleep. And as we all know, completely paralyzing. I couldn't function. So go ahead, Chrissy.
No, I was just going to say, so I just wanted to clarify back to when you were talking about the story, at being at the Army Navy game, and you said you couldn't participate, but you couldn't participate for no real reason besides the fact that you thought that you couldn't. It was just the thoughts that you were having in your mind, like on the outside, physically, right, emotionally, everything else looked good. But in your mind, you were like, I can't do this.
Right.
Correct.
Right. And no matter how much I've read about women's wellness, I read all Christine Northrup's books in my 40s. My head didn't go there. Right. My head couldn't go to, what's happening? Maybe I should read up on something. No. I was experiencing it.
Yeah.
And living it. So I didn't have that capacity at the time. Okay. So feelings of paranoia, can't stop crying, cannot sleep for anything. Now, one day I'm doing my hair. My husband's behind me in the bedroom and he says, Marian, look at this. There's a pile of hair where I sit and do my hair. And I'm, again, almost catatonic because I haven't slept, but I'm trying to go through the motions and fake it till you make it. And that indeed was my hair on the floor. I thought it was my dog. I actually had a little furry dog. So there was my hair, the top of my hair. You couldn't notice from a distance.
Yeah.
But of course, we all know if we miss one hair, we would know it. So, and then, as many of us do, I start my day for 32 years with my coffee. It is a meditation. There's a candle, there's the paper, and I don't speak to anyone until I have that special time in the morning. And I came down and I looked at the pot and I didn't want to have it. And I wasn't nauseous, nothing like that. I had no stomach problems. I didn't want it and I couldn't drink it.
Wow.
And then the same thing happened with my food. And I adore food. When I'm eating breakfast, I think about what I'm having for lunch.
Right.
When I'm having lunch, I think about what I'm having for dinner. I mean, we love food. We love to eat.
Yes.
And I couldn't. And so my regular healthy weight of a 125 went to 104.
Wow.
So, but again, this didn't happen in a day. So this is why I was able to fake it till you make it. And then I started going to church in the mornings and lighting candles for myself. I've never lit a candle for myself in my life in a church. That would always be for someone else that I was praying for.
Right.
But I was on my knees. And someone who was very concerned about me, and everyone suffered with me. I just put it out there. Suggested I see a doctor, a lovely doctor, and I will say that to this day, was a psychiatrist. And interrupt me whenever you want, Chrissy.
Well, I was just going to say, so you weren't even suffering in silence. Like, it's not like you were holding this all in for all this time. Like, your family or your close friends, people knew that you were suffering. You were talking to them about these issues because you just knew something wasn't right.
Well, I'll tell you, Chrissy, something I failed to mention. I wasn't talking about it to anybody.
Okay.
I had one family member who I would call.
Okay.
I was believe it or not, I've been married to my husband for 32 years. I've known him since I'm 12 years old. I did not want him to see me falling apart. I wanted to fix it. I wanted to find out a way to fix it. And I also did not tell all those wonderful girlfriends in the back. Of course, I canceled boot camp. I stopped exercising. I basically didn't leave the house unless I had to drive a child somewhere or get money or get food. I stopped answering emails and text messages. People started asking my family members, "Where's Marian? Is she okay? Does she have cancer? What's going on?" And I could not talk to anyone.
Okay.
And I couldn't explain it because I really didn't know what was happening. By the way, when it was all over, I took all those people out for lunch individually to thank them and apologize, believe it or not. But no, I was not telling anybody. This was
so you were in a way suffering in silence and on
definitely.
your own. Yeah. Cause I mean, I do think that that's what most women do. I think, we all have a tribe that we can lean on. We all have family we can lean on, but I do think when stuff really hits the fan, a lot of times we just go to lockdown or we suffer in silence a bit and don't share what's going on because we want to fix it. So, okay. So you were lighting candles and
I was referred to a doctor.
Oh, right. Okay. Yes.
So by the way, I at this time, I'm about 52.
Okay.
And I had a full checkup with a very highly regarded internist who I'd been with for 30 years, every year.
Right.
Soup to nuts. Same with my OB, everything. But I hadn't seen him in quite some time. That's another story. And I don't know if you want me to tell that as well. But anyway.
Of course. Yes, I do. Actually, now that I'm remembering it from the article. Yes, I do.
Well, it just speaks to why I hadn't seen him.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So,
and a little bit about how women are treated sometimes. Yeah.
Oh, 1,000%. But you didn't go to him first. You went to a psychiatrist first, right?
So when I was 52 years old, yes, I went to a psychiatrist. She was lovely. She hugged me. I cried. She was so empathetic. And she asked me a lot of questions. And then she sent me home with some very lengthy questionnaires, which were sent off somewhere and came back. So when I went to see her, she had all the answers from these quizzes that I took. And she said I had depression.
Okay.
And I was shocked. Believe it or not, I was shocked. Me, right. Happy Marian, has depression. And I said, well, how do you know? And she said, well, your serotonin must be very low. And I've read a little bit about serotonin, but not a lot. So I remember distinctly putting my arm out and I said, let's measure it.
Yeah.
And she said, no, there's no blood test. There's no measurement. So I said, well, how do you know? And she said, well, it's based on question and answers and our conversation. And so if you don't have serotonin or if it's very low, you're incapable of feeling happy, etc. So I said, what do I do? What do I do? I want to man up and do it and get back to myself. So she prescribed two things. She prescribed 5 or 10 milligrams of Lexapro. Okay. That would make anybody feel better. By the way, I've never been on any antidepressant. And if I think it's wonderful that people have them if they help them, believe me, with great respect for that. But I hadn't been on one. So Lexapro makes you feel a little bit better. And then she gave me a drug called Saphris, Saphris, to help me sleep. And let me tell you, it helped me sleep. And for a short period of time, I thought, okay, I'm getting better. I thought this is working. But ultimately, it was a Band-Aid. And I just continued to get worse to the point of, ultimately becoming a catatonic, almost recluse in my house. My family took the car keys away from me. I really couldn't function or have a conversation. So I was mostly reclusive. If I had to go somewhere, they'd pop me up on the couch like a pillow, just put me in the background. And so she was, I went on, she gave me probably 8 to 10 different antidepressants over about 8 months. So every 6 weeks, that's not working. No, it's not working. No, it's not working. I have a long list printout from my pharmacy. They weren't working. So I finally emailed my internist, who knows me very well, knows my whole family, is highly regarded physician in New York City. But I hadn't seen him since I was 50. because at my last checkup, when I was very healthy, happy and whole and capable, strong person, I couldn't believe it. Well, we knew each other pretty well from all the years of talking. And we always spoke for about 45 minutes. He wants to know the whole person. That's great. I know about his life. He knows about mine. But at this time, it might crazy. He had a new romance in his life. He was telling me all about this very sensual woman. He was very dizzy with this new romance, that wonderful, lusting, fabulous stage. And he was just dizzy with it and just describing her to me. Almost, too much information, as I've said, a little uncomfortable. And as he was telling me about this very sensual woman, he stopped and he said, "You know what?" I didn't say anything. He said, "You should get a boob job."
Oh my God.
And I couldn't. And then I didn't say anything. And then he said, "Are you ready?" He said, "If you don't want to do it for yourself, do it for your husband."
Oh my gosh.
And I don't care how many years he's known me. And by the way, and it's a completely another story, but when I was in my 20s and 30s, I had various abdominal operations and all these things. My abdomen looks like a patchwork quilt, and I don't even care. It doesn't hurt me. And it was all fixed. But to talk to a person, first of all, he was talking about her, and that's how the compliment, or not the compliment, the suggestion came. But based on the fact that I'd had so many surgeries and I'm a mother of 2 young women, that I would do that. And then I had to go in and take, disrobe. So, at that moment I said, I'm never going back. But anyway, after
I can understand why you decided not to go. I mean, how uncomfortable is that? And inappropriate. I mean, the doctor-patient relationship, that is definitely crossing the line. And quite frankly, for anyone to say, "Oh, you should get a boob job for your husband," is absolutely absurd. So to come from someone where you're putting trust and confidentiality and expecting them to help you, it's awful. It's a terrible feeling. But again, like you said, that's why it's how women are sometimes spoken to and treated, and it's unfortunate.
Right. Yeah, I didn't appreciate it, and that was insulting. But anyway, I was so
desperate. You're desperate for
I was
doctors.
Desperate.
Yeah.
Desperate.
So you go see him.
I emailed him. He said, "Do not despair." I said, all these things. He said, "Do not despair. There is help for this." So in I go to the city with a relative and my husband. And for the first time in 30 years, he doesn't ask to talk to me for, a half an hour, 45 minutes alone. That was different. Okay. So we started to talk and I got very weepy. And I said, I told him all the drugs I was on. And I said, "I can't sleep. And I'm shaking. I'm weeping. I can't sleep. I can't function." And he said, "Well, a lot of people think they don't sleep, but they really do." But again, I'm not strong enough to say, I can't, handle, now that I look back.
Yeah.
And then I talked a little bit more about what was going on. And well, here it is, Chrissy. He handed me a card for the best psychiatrist in New York City. He never examined me. I was just sent to another psychiatrist.
Yeah. Never examined you, didn't order any blood work, didn't suggest running any other tests, literally just referred you directly to a psychiatrist.
No, well, let's just see if anything else going on. You haven't been here in a while. Let's make sure everything's else okay. No. And off I go to, hotshot in New York City. I meet this. So this is, there was the psychiatrist, now the internist, now I'm a psychiatrist. And after speaking with me for 20 to 25 minutes alone, and that all of those medications had failed me, he said, "You don't just have depression, you have severe depression." Okay. And by the way, the psychiatrist would often ask, "Have you lost interest in doing things that you usually like to do?" And I have to say, I probably said yes. But what I wish I had said or could have said was, it's not that I've lost interest. It's just I can't. I cannot do those things. But does that mean the same as lost interest? I guess so.
Yeah, because you didn't have the energy, right? You didn't have the drive or the energy.
No capacity.
Right.
No capacity, mentally, physically to do any of that. So he suggested that because none of the medications were working, that I undergo ECT, electroconvulsive therapy. And believe it or not, I didn't. I said, well, how do I do that? So he said that, first of all, he said that 75% of patients with severe depression get their lives back. And that's all I needed to hear. 75%, that's pretty good. Get their lives back. Are there any long-term side effects? No. The only side effect is a short-term memory loss. And I was ready to sign up. Of course, my husband was totally against it. I mean, it just sounds like something so freaky, like out of that
awful.
movie.
Yeah, it sounds awful. Right. I mean, we've seen it in, like you said, in
the
movies.
Cuckoo movie.
Yeah, right. And it's just it's and the threat of any kind of memory loss is, quite frankly, pretty scary, right? I mean, but I also I very much understand where you were coming from, because when you are that desperate to get your life back, you are willing to sacrifice and do what you need to do in order to feel like your old self again.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah, well, so I get that.
So ECT, basically what they do in a hospital setting, almost looks like an operating room, and everyone's covered in their masks, just as if you were having an operation, which it's not. What they do is they induce a seizure in the part of your brain where they think, you're having a chemical imbalance, right? That's what primary depression is, a chemical imbalance that causes all those awful symptoms. So they induce a seizure there to kind of stimulate. I'm sure doctors will go crazy that I'm not saying this exactly right, but just for layman's terms, that area of the brain. And by the way, I have read of people who had this done, 12 times and completely got their life back. It does work for some people, even people who've written to me, who heard my story. So I was hospitalized. I was supposed to do 12 rounds. They only do it every other day. So I'm going to be there for several weeks. So I went in the hospital. I had the one thing they forgot to tell me, actually, I don't think they forgot. They just never told me or my husband or any of my family members that when I went to the hospital, I thought I would be watching TV and having visitors. My husband even asked if I could have a private room. And they said, well, there's TV, but you can't use your phone. But, you can watch TV and talk to people on the phone and blah, blah. And I thought, I'm just going to eat hospital food and close my eyes and watch cable TV and do this.
Right.
So when we arrived at the hospital, we went up to the 9th or 10th floor, and there were security guards, I remember. And then the security guard had to hit a passcode to let us into this area. We still don't know what's going on, but we know something's strange.
Yeah.
And then we walked in, and there were 3 doctors sitting at a table. And when I walked in, a nurse came over from the table and she asked me to raise my arms. And you just do what doctors say, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because they're wearing the white coats. And she cut the drawstring of my yoga pants and then the shoelaces from my running sneakers. And we're all just stunned. I'm just and I was being admitted to the psych ward.
Yeah.
I was being admitted to a locked unit that I was not allowed to leave until they told me. But I didn't know that. We didn't know that going in. The psychiatrist who suggested the ECT actually said to me, I think you're really going to like the unit.
Oh my gosh.
You're not going to have to worry about making dinner or driving your daughter or any of the things that you're finding so difficult. I think you're really going to like the unit.
As if you were like,
as far as I was concerned, it was going to be a condo.
Right. You're checking into like the Marriott for the weekend. I mean, literally, like that's what he's making it sound like. It's going to be a little, retreat away.
Mm-hmm.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. So I never got to the 12 rounds. I definitely distinguished myself. I wouldn't, by the way, the psych ward isn't really what it sounds like. I just want to say with great respect to anyone who ever have to be there. 95% of the people are just quiet, getting whatever their treatment is.
Yeah.
And of course, there's some things that are disturbing, but I try to remember the good things. Like I did have this lovely roommate who every time they took me out, she would say, I'm praying for you. And she was just like a lifeline.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
I know I was going to say, and it's more about just expectations, right? You don't know what you're walking into, and you walk into something that is completely different than what you expected to walk into. That's what makes it scary, right? Because if you had known that you were going into a psych ward and it was a locked unit, and you would have been mentally prepared to walk into that place to get the treatment that you needed, right? But it's about not explaining, not knowing. And that's what makes it fearful. I mean, these psych wards exist for a reason. They're there so that they can help people that need the help and get the help. So, nothing to disparage them, but it's about knowing and expectations and being able to be ready to do what it is you need to do. So that's what I would think would be the scariest part of that. And then finding out you're in a locked unit and can't leave. I mean, it's like taking away your freedom when you aren't incapacitated. You are able to have free will and make decisions.
I was able to have visitors. My husband, God bless him, came every day. My 5 brothers and sisters came every day. Yeah, by the way, I was there on Easter. We're Catholic, so I was there for Good Friday, Palm Sunday, Easter Sunday, all of that. And they were all leaving their families to come see me. We really kind of drove the doctors crazy because most people didn't have this family of siblings coming in and bringing me milkshakes and tuna for sandwiches. And they would be like, you can't have this many visitors. So, and by the way, I just want to put out there, a few people have asked me, were you put there because they thought you might harm yourself?
Yeah.
And God help people, but never. And every doctor would say, do you feel like harming yourself? Or I never had a suicidal thought or of harming myself. So that's not why I was put there.
Right.
I think it was a very legitimate question. It was just to be, monitored while you're having this treatment. But after about 7 treatments, they let me go because I was just not fitting the category of the typical patient there. And I think they were seeing that I didn't belong there. But mostly the reason I left was because I actually got sick when I was in there. I told my best friend when I went in there, I said, I can't get sick in here. Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
I can't get sick. So I was always washing my hands and taking the shower. And one night I was shaking with chills, sweating. I practically crawled to the nurse and she took my temperature and I had 104 temperature.
Wow.
And my family was very unhappy and they let me go. So I only did the 7 of the 12 rounds. And I came home. I was back to the drawing board.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
so there you are, after enduring all of that, still not feeling any relief, not feeling like yourself, nothing's working. What's the next step?
So I saw 11 doctors total in about 3 years. And I will tell you that I did also go to my longtime OBGYN, who I love very much. And when I sat down to see him, the first thing he said was, I'm worried about you. And that really made me feel good because he could just tell. But before I opened my mouth, we talked and I had my regular exam and that all came back fine. And I asked him to test my hormones. And he said, you know what, Marian, I don't do that, but I think that's a good idea. So I want you to see my partner, my female partner. She tests hormones. So I made a date to see her the following week and I went to see her. I've heard of her, again, very reputable Long Island doctor. I went to see her. She had an assistant in the room and I was very weepy. Again, I don't have a lot of energy, but I'm weeping and I basically tell her what I used to be like and what I'm now. And she listened. She didn't really look at me very much. When I finished talking, she looked at her assistant and said, tell her, yes, she called me her, tell her to order, some very expensive supplements from her website. None of them were medication. None of them were, and I put my arm out and I said, aren't you going to test my hormones? Oh, excuse me. And that's when she basically rolled her eyes and told the assistant to tell me what I could order from her website. She really made me feel like a weak, complaining loser. And I think sometimes coming from a woman to another woman stung a little bit more than coming even from some of the male doctors. I don't know why, but I just felt like, come on, aren't we women supporting women? It wasn't like that at all.
Right. Well, because you expect a certain level of empathy from another woman who, should, understand. And I mean, I don't understand how you could be an OB-GYN and not test hormones. Like I'm just floored by that. I mean, floored. I mean, I had an internist who, when I started going through perimenopause 5 years ago, I thought I was like, all of a sudden came down with some crazy virus. And I said, and I waited like weeks and weeks and I wasn't feeling better because it was like a switch just flipped in me. And I went to my, internal medicine doctor, who is also a female and who is wonderful. But I said, you need to test everything in my body. Something is not right. And at the time, menopause didn't even cross my mind because I was only 43. Right. But anyway, she did. She tested everything and she tested, estrogen markers or whatever the test is. High level. It's a high level test. It's not like we were digging deep, And and she was like, I think she said your estrogen markers or whatever it was are low. I think you need to go to your OB-GYN and talk to them. And then interestingly enough, when I went to my OB, she was like, oh, welcome to menopause. Like it was like this wonderful thing. Meanwhile, I was sick and not myself and, just in a bad way. And that was her attitude. Like, it is what it is. Now you just got to deal with it. Again, this is 5 years and I think we've come a long way in 5 years. But anyway, I had a little bit of both, with my physician, some people who just don't want to listen and, just think that you have to quote unquote, suck it up and deal with it kind of thing. Okay. So then you leave. Do you order the supplements? Do you, it doesn't even matter.
And none of them are any supplements. They have these long names and it just, they were not appropriate and nothing to do. And of course I took them.
Yeah.
And she left such a bad taste. So no, they did nothing for me. So, now I've seen 2 OBGYNs, an internist, a couple of psychiatrists. So of course I think I have depression and psychiatrists are the ones who treat depression.
Right.
So I see another psychiatrist. And he says, I think you might not have depression. And we're like, all ears.
Like, all right.
And he said, I think your symptoms may be coming from a neurological problem. And that's a scary thing to hear, by the way.
Of course.
So he sent me to a neurologist. The neurologist made me, I had requested an MRI of my brain and then a spinal tap. And then they sent me home with an apparatus of little magnetic discs that stuck to my head, almost with a hairnet over it, because these discs had to stay on my head for 3 days, 72 hours. The things on my head were attached to a wrap around my stomach that had a monitor and also a camera set up next to my bed to watch me try to sleep at night. I was not allowed to shower. By the way, I almost never showered anyway during this time, probably 3 times a week. No joke. But that was one of the requirements. You can't shower, you can't get wet. And so I had this, hideous scarf on my head with my children and husband home. And I'm trying to pretend that, this might not be a serious thing. Anyway, thankfully, all of those tests came back. I have no neurological problems that would be causing my symptoms. So then someone else suggested I see an internist who's a local concierge internist, great reputation in town, female. And I went to see her. And she's never met me before, doesn't know anything about me, doesn't know my bio that you just read. And she did put a needle in my arm. And then after the examination, she said, you know what? I think you might not have depression. And again, we are all ears. And she said, maybe you're sad because you don't have any small children to care for anymore.
Oh my God.
No reason to get up in the morning.
Oh, geez.
Pause. Maybe you should get a job.
Yeah, that fix everything. You don't have energy to shower, but you should get a job.
Yeah, or brush my teeth. Right. So, but again, the arrogance and condescension, especially when you don't have the energy, it was humiliating. And all she did was take my money and tell me to get a job. So she didn't help me.
Yeah. So next, on to the next. It's just, it's really unbelievable.
So one day, I'll preface this, but I remember this day. Everyone would leave. My husband would leave. The children would leave. And I came down once in the morning and I went up once that night, and that was it. And I came down the stairs and I sat at my computer. And again, I'm Googling depression every which way. And I had my sweet little dog would sit by the back door. And that's how we knew he wanted to go out. He didn't bark. He didn't scratch. He would sit there. And I remember just falling apart and crying. And I said, sorry, Willoughby. His name was Willoughby. I'm sorry, Willoughby. I can't. And all I had to do was open the door because he would just go out and have the fence. But that was how much I couldn't walk to let the dog out. And that morning, I got an email from an old friend who said, I heard you have depression. And I'm like, oh, great. Everybody knows. Everybody must know. But she told me that she had suffered from depression 10 years before. She had undergone something called TMS, transmagnetic stimulation. And it had really helped her. So I start researching TMS. She finds me a doctor, very, very thoughtful of her, 15 minutes from my home, Harvard educated. He has offices in New York, Connecticut, and Long Island. I go to him with my husband. He says, you don't have depression. You don't have severe depression. You have treatment-resistant depression. So that's not a really good thing to hear. So there's something wrong with me that I can't, be cured by these drugs they've given me. He said, but you've taken 14 different antidepressants. You've undergone ECT, and none of that's working. So I think you should do 36 rounds of TMS. So TMS is an in-office, in and out of the office the same day. It only takes about 20 minutes. They put a sort of an apparatus on your head, and it sends magnetic pulses, again, probably to that area that they're trying to rejuvenate, that is the chemical imbalance. It was not painful, but it was 5 times a week for, whatever 36 is, 5-6 weeks. And nothing helped. I didn't change, nothing, absolutely zip. So at that point, we've done all of this. And this doctor said, none of these things have worked. So I suggest that you take ketamine. Ketamine is a street drug. We all read about, highly addictive, dangerous drug, but it is definitely being used carefully by doctors in hospital settings, thankfully helping people with whatever it is,
right?
That they're suffering some. So again, my family is like, absolutely not. And here I am, I start researching, and son of a gun, Yale New Haven Hospital, an hour and 10 minutes away, is doing clinical trials. And I'm very familiar with that area. Both my daughters went to college in Connecticut. And I thought, okay, I'm going to move to Connecticut, and I'm going to be in this carefully studied trial. That's what I wanted to do. That's where my head was at. At the same time, there was a push from some people for me to go away. There is a place in Arizona called Sierra Tucson. I'm sure they do wonderful things for people with the great respect. But I would go away for a month for my treatment-resistant depression. And it was the only thing I wouldn't do. I just did not want to do it. And my husband said, I will never let her go to another place after, the experience that I had in the other hospital. And then, Chrissy, I'm going to say, I don't like the word fate. I'm not going to say fate, but the word of the day today in my word daily, I don't know if there's a day of the new thing my husband and I follow is the daily word of the day. And today's word was kismet, Kismet. And it basically means fate, things coming together when they should. And exactly. I also believe that that's how you and I met through our beautiful friend, Marian, et cetera.
Yes,
so
exactly.
There was a birthday party, a family birthday party. It was a command performance, and I would go. And again, I would be given the puppy to hold or to sit on the couch. And I was at this event, and I will never forget as long as I live. My mother took me, and she kind of moved me toward the buffet that was set up as we do with the big family. And she said, okay, Marian, you're going to give out the, melon and prosciutto and the tomato mousse, and, just giving me a job, something to do. And I was doing that, almost like a robot. And I'll never forget, my younger brother came up to have his plate. And he said, my nutritionist he said, my nutritionist says, to put your protein here and your carbs here and your vegetables and fruit. And I just remember, and we're all foodies in my family. We like talking about food. I just remember him saying it. So a few days later, I thought, what do I do now? I've seen 2 internists, 2 OB-GYNs, 4 psychiatrists. I also saw an Ayurvedic doctor, by the way, Chrissy. The Ayurvedic doctor told me to stick out my tongue. And he told me that he thought I had a fatty liver. That was it. By the way, I don't, Chrissy. I found that out. But that was the doctor number 10.
Yeah, of course.
So I thought about what my brother said. I called him. I said, could you give me the name of that nutritionist? I have to do something. I said to myself, just have the proper nutrition. Maybe get an IV in my arm, something. So I looked at her up. Her name is Dr. Carolina Sierra. She's not just a nutritionist who, got a certificate and hung out a shingle. She's an internist endocrinologist in New York City. And she turned my life around. I know I'm going on and on. So if you want to interject.
No,
go ahead.
I'm waiting with bated breath to hear how this all turned around. So, I'm glad we're there.
We're there. I know.
Okay, so she turned her life around, and tell us what she did.
Okay. I sat in the chair. I gave her my history. And again, I'm thinking I'm going there just to get nutritional advice. And she puts the needle in my arm. And after hearing my history, she turns to the nurse and says, I want the following tests: thyroid, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, vitamin B, vitamin D, and Epstein-Barr. I said, Epstein-Barr? She said, yeah, I think you may have had that. 2 days later, I go back, the blood work is in, and she says, Marian, she turns over the blood work. The reason none of the treatments or medications you took helped you was because they are to treat a chemical imbalance in the brain. And that is not what caused your symptoms. You haven't slept in 2.5 years because you have no progesterone. You can't stop crying or feel like yourself or have any confidence because you have no estrogen. And you have no testosterone, which we gals need too, but that's a whole nother day, but we do. So those things are off. She said, in addition, your thyroid is a disaster. You have 0 vitamin B, you have 0 vitamin D, and you did have the Epstein-Barr virus. Those are 7 different things, one of which would put anyone on the couch and have to take work, leave work. But 7 of them together, she said, I'll never forget it. She said, Marian, and she was just so calm, as if she talks like this every day. She said, altogether, you fell off a cliff.
Yeah.
And immediately she prescribed bioidentical hormone cream, which I rubbed on my little wrist, appropriate thyroid medication, prescription strength vitamin D, which I know I take 50,000 units every Monday, vitamin B12, 25,000, I can't remember the units, every day. And the Epstein-Barr virus had left. And I will say that way under a month, within 2 weeks, I was coming back to life. It was like I rose from the dead.
And it is amazing that, first of all, years and years of just feeling awful and going through all of these very expensive treatments.
Oh, you said it. Mm-hmm.
It could have all been solved with a blood test, a simple blood test. I mean, that's all it took. And okay, the hormones, I know, hormones aren't on, your CBC, but the vitamins are, and like testing for that. And it's just amazing. And it makes sense that your body responded as soon as you actually got some hormones and vitamins in your body, which are, simple things that we all need to function and live. But this took years and years for you to get to. And I'm just so sorry that you had to experience all of this. I mean, I am thrilled that you came out of it and that you're feeling great and you're back to your healthy, vibrant self. But it's really devastating to think that, it took so long for someone to truly empathize with you and do a simple blood test.
Thanks, Chrissy. I actually, looking back now, it was very long, almost 3 years. I absolutely am one of the lucky ones. When I see women with thinning hair and bloated faces, and my heart goes right to what's going on with you. What medication are you on? And I'm definitely one of the lucky ones because after the first interview that I did, I received many, many messages. One woman said, I think I had almost what happened to you. She said, except my marriage didn't last. A lot of families fall apart because of this. And if I hadn't met Dr. Sierra, I would definitely be a recluse, and I don't know where I would be. I remember when I was young, driving around the town with my mom. I was probably 10 or 11 in the car, and there was a pretty house. And I said to my mother, Mom, look at that pretty house. And she said, oh, it is so pretty, Marian. She said, but it's very sad. The woman who lives there is a recluse. And I said, Mom, what does that mean? And she explained a little bit. And I thought about that. And I think about people, 30, 40 years ago, or God forbid, even now, who never found out, what was happening to them. And everyone just thinks it's in their head. So I think the big message, there's always a lesson, right?
Oh, there's always a reason these things
happen.
There's always a message in the mess. Yeah.
Yeah. Is, for women, it might not be in your head. And I don't think that anyone, with all respect to people, God, who are suffering, but I don't think, because of what I went through, that anyone should be diagnosed and treated for chemical depression, which is primary depression, until everything else is ruled out. Because there's secondary depression. And, from my research, I was actually heard this from a psychiatrist. I was on a radio show. He said, we have to learn in my field, which is psychiatry, that there's primary depression caused by a chemical imbalance in the brain, and secondary depression caused by a myriad of other things, like we've discussed before. So I think that's a big message.
Yeah.
And then
yeah. No, and I think the message clearly is do not give up, because until you feel better, you cannot give up, right? There is help out there somewhere. And I don't let anybody, no matter whether they're wearing a white coat or have Harvard degrees on their wall, don't let anyone tell you that it's in your head, because it's not. And, like I said, when we spoke on the phone, I can empathize with your story because I too went through nothing as severe, with electric shock therapy and spinal taps. But I went through feeling horrendous and awful with, every symptom in the book: not sleeping, hot flashes, weight gain, mood swings, joint pain. I mean, it's just, the list goes on, and didn't find help anywhere. Went to many different doctors, but for me, it wasn't until I finally found the right doctor who could listen and test and do what absolutely needed to be done. And it was like I was a new woman, like you said. I mean, it's just, you have to keep going. You have to understand that your symptoms are real and that you deserve to feel good every single day. And there is help out there. So make sure you find the right doctor to help. And I also think the message is talk to friends. Like we're women, we're all going through very similar things in this stage of our lives. Talk to friends, right? Because that's how you find out, who to go to. What works, what doesn't work. I think talking to friends, talking to family members, not being afraid to admit what you're going through is another message, because that's how we network. That's how we are better together and come out stronger.
Absolutely. I knew, Chrissy, when I started sharing with my network of girlfriends, probably 90%, which went right into New York City to go to the doctor who had helped me. And they all found something, whether it was small or large,
of course,
whether it was cardiac or something else, they were getting answers. So I knew by sharing it was helping. That's why I decided I needed to write about it. And then there was kismet once again, when my dear friend Jean Stafford said, you have to meet this writing coach named Diane Gottlieb. So Diane was helping me with where to try to publish the essay about my story, when she asked me to interview me for her blog, which is called Woman Pause, amplifying the voices of women over 50. And my story landed right where it was supposed to. It was better than getting an essay published. It was supposed to be in an interview form with a woman who wanted to share it. And that is just such a joy to me that by sharing it, it's helping people, period.
Well, Marian, I want to thank you so much for sharing your story with us today. Thank you for being so authentic and so real. And, I just really hope that whoever is listening to this podcast out there, if they're having any of the same similar struggles, this gives them the hope to know that there is light at the end of the tunnel. There is help out there. Reach out. I know you gave us the doctor's name in New York. I mean, you could travel, right? But I want to thank you so much. Thank you for sharing today and for being here with us.
It was my absolute pleasure. Thank you very much, Chrissy. Stay well.
Thank you.
Endocrinologist for women. Endocrinologist.
Yeah, absolutely.
They'll give you the answers.
I know. I love it. Especially the right one.
Absolutely, Chrissy. Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you so much, Marian. And guys, thank you for listening. We will be back next week with another amazing warrior story for you. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram at Suburban Warrior, and I will talk to you next week.